This is the Action Shooting Show. This is episode or show 2. And tonight we are all going to be talking about dry fire and free or really cheap training, since nobody can find ammo right now. So we'll get it kicked off. I think everyone here does have some ammo, though. Like, we're all stocked up decent enough.
It depends on who's asking.
Yeah.
I lost all my ammo in a boating accident.
Let's not.
Yeah. All right. Well, some people have no ammo.
All mine, homeless people in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. All right. So I guess to get this kicked off, we'll talk about what exactly is dry fire, because a lot of people know and some absolutely do not know or do not understand. So as like the lawyer safety thing, the first important thing is that you still follow all the rules of firearm safety. So still treat it as if it's loaded, finger off the trigger, all that good stuff. Make sure you're pointing the gun, especially this, make sure you're pointing the gun in a safe direction. So good backstop, basement or something is ideal, but if you don't have that, just make sure if you touched off a round somehow mysteriously, it doesn't go into somebody.
So that's one thing you can talk about. When you're dry firing,
Right.
One of the things people say is you clear out all loaded ammo from the room.
Yeah.
So you'd want to do dry fire in a place where there is no loaded ammo, so you can't accidentally introduce ammo into whatever you're doing. And then if you're going to be having targets on the wall, if you don't have a basement, you'd want to pick a wall that is pointing out into space, not into your neighbor, your apartment wall where your neighbor sleeps, if you can help it, even though you're going to do everything you can to not have ammunition in the gun or around the gun. So things to think about there.
Yeah, redundancy and all that. I mean, we've all the same safety rules, because in dry fire, you are pulling the trigger, most likely. I mean, you can do dry fire without pulling the trigger, and if you don't have a safe area, maybe that's all you can do. You can also dry fire at the range. So if you really don't have a safe place, that would be maybe the next best option. So kind of safety stuff aside, when we're talking about dry fire, we're talking about doing everything that you would do with a gun, but without ammo. So when we say dry, the gun is completely dry, as Mark said. No ammo in the room, no nothing. So with that, it may be as simple as so a really simple drill would be the white wall drill. If you're going to start off, this helped my shooting a ton. I'll kind of show you here with this is a SIRT gun. We'll kind of talk about this later, but it doesn't have, it's not a real gun. So, but the white wall drill is just simple. You're pointing the gun at a wall. You're getting your grip, everything you normally would. You've already racked the gun. It's a good habit to check before you start. Check 3 times. Make sure, drop your mag, make sure your mag's empty. Rack the slide, make sure there's nothing in it. Again, redundancy on the safety. But you get a good sight picture pointed at typically a white wall, a light colored wall. You're not actually aiming at anything in this drill, and you're just looking at that front sight and focusing on the front sight with your back sight as a good sight picture, whatever you find acceptable. And then all you're doing is breaking the trigger and watching that front sight, making sure that it doesn't dip, it doesn't move at all while you're pulling the trigger. And if it does, then you adjust your grip, you adjust your finger, you figure out how you can break the trigger. And typically this is done with a shot timer. And the idea is that as soon as the beep starts, you try to pull the trigger before the beep finishes. So you're not lightly pulling the trigger, you're pulling it quick and making sure that doesn't move. That's maybe one of the simplest beginning drills. And that's what a lot of people think when they talk about dry fire, but it's actually, there's a ton of other things you can do. So I don't know if someone else wants to jump in there so I don't do all the talking.
Yeah, one thing I'd add to that is that when you're going.
Yeah, I started out with.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mark.
I just lost. Was Tiger talking, or did we lose him?
No, go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I was just going to add to what Ryan said. Not only are you trying to, so you can do it two ways. You know, if you're going to practice for the sake of shooting tight groups, or you want to be able to make those far hits, you can practice where you take up the slack, feel that wall, pull through the wall. You know, that's also a good skill to have. But like Ryan said, you want that fast trigger pull, because when you're in an action shooting situation, TM, that you would want to go as fast as you can. And so you want to be doing it quick. Another thing that I'm currently trying to break myself of is when you're doing that fast version, get your finger off the trigger. Because as you get into, you know, faster and faster shooting, you're not pinning, finding the reset, and then letting off, and then going again. You need to pull the trigger and get off that trigger as fast as you can. So there's a lot of different places where you'll introduce movement. You'll introduce movement in the take up and break. You'll introduce movement when you're dropping it. All of that needs to be consistently still for the shot to go where you want it to go. And there's different ways that you can add on and make this a little more difficult. One thing that's typically done is you take a spent case, a 9mm case, and balance it on the end of the gun, and then balance it on the end. I don't have a clock here somewhere. So if you balance a spent case on the end, when you pull that trigger, that case shouldn't move. That shouldn't jump off there. But you're also training your eyes. So you want to be able to watch those sights and know that they're not moving. But otherwise, I agree with what Ryan says. I just want to add in those extra little details. And then I guess the last thing is you need to be squeezing the piss out of the gun. We can talk about grip later or at any point, but this drill is only good if you do things exactly like you'd be doing it on the range. And you need to be squeezing tight grip, support hand, and strong hand when you're on the range. So you also need to be squeezing it like crazy when you're doing this drill. But that would be what I would add to that. So go ahead, Tiger.
Yeah, you actually just hit the one that I was going to really emphasize there at the end. Doing everything exactly like you would as if a live round was in the chamber. Like you don't, don't baby the gun. Don't do anything you wouldn't do if there wasn't live ammo in it. That way, that's the only way it really is helpful. I mean, yeah, anybody can, hold the gun and squeeze the trigger and, and it not do anything. But dry fire is a needs, for it to be effective, it needs to be as intentional as live fire training is.
Yep. Yeah. And I will add that, especially if you just are starting dry fire, if you can do any of this or dry fire for more than like 3, 4, 5 minutes at a time, you are probably not gripping the gun hard enough, because you really need to be gripping so hard that you're, I mean, I've switched up where like I was gripping so hard, and then I'll do like reload drills, which we can get into. Like that's another way that you can do dry fires, not just pulling the trigger, but like drop a mag, grab another one out of your belt, put a new mag in, that sort of thing, because you're not gripping as hard as long. But yeah, if you can do it when you first start, unless you've got like you're a mechanic, you're got this super hard grip strength because you're using your hands all day in and day out. Like most people, I would say, probably can't go more than 3 or 4 minutes without their hands getting sore at first, if they're not regularly dry firing already.
Yeah, I used to dry fire watching TV shows, and obviously that gets a little bit more. I've got a basement TV, so it was a concrete wall behind my TV. But I would dry fire during commercials, and then that was like a good time limit, because by the end of a 1.5, 2-minute commercial, my hands were shot and ready for a 5 to 10 minute break.
Yep. All right, so kind of going on with this. So when we talk about pulling the trigger, the first thing most people will run into is the fact that depending on what drill you're doing, you can only really pull the trigger with the exact trigger pull once. So, like a single action, this is not this is a fake gun too for safety people. But you know, it's like a double or a single action gun like this. I can pull the trigger once, and now it's not the same trigger pull. For what we're doing, that's not, you know, for a lot of drills, that's not really a concern. I know double action, single actions. Typically, you'll pull the trigger that double action the first time, and then if you just don't let out completely, you can pull the trigger again, and the hammer will stay down. Glocks. Do you have something you can show them the Glock trick, Mark? Since you got your Glock there.
Yep. So the idea would be that if a Glock is, I want to not have it blur out. So if a Glock is just slightly out of battery, I mean ever so slightly out of battery, the trigger will reset. And so the idea is if you can put something in here slightly thicker than paper, but usually thinner than cardboard. One thing I typically use is like out of a soda pop box or, you know, beer box, whatever you want to call it. Like that thin cardboard is just about enough to get it so it's just barely out of battery, and then the trigger, you can squeeze it and it won't break.
Quarter of playing card works really.
Kind of cutting out there, Tiger. Can you say that again?
I said the quarter of a playing card works really well. Like just a standard playing card, just rip the quarter off of it, stick it in there.
Yep.
Yeah, obviously, you want it down low enough so it's not in your sights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But there's shortcomings to all these. So while it does give you that reset, it doesn't give you that honest break. And so it's bushier break that you would get. They also make devices that you can insert in the magazine, and then they're supposed to reset the click. So you'll get the click each time. I haven't tried those. They're like $100 a magazine, I think. Or maybe they're cheaper now, but that's one option.
I think the important thing to kind of note is when you're practicing your dry firing, and this is kind of a good training in general, but you only want to be training one skill at a time. So if you're practicing for like a trigger pull, like we were talking earlier with something like the white wall drill, you just want that actual real life trigger pull every single time. Now, if you're practicing, let's say a draw to a first shot, you know, again, rack the gun each time, draw, break that trigger. But if you want to practice something like a target transition, so I'm going to shoot 2 shots at this target, transition to another one. It won't be the same exact trigger pull, but we're not really worried about our trigger pull in that drill. We're worried about our vision and getting that sight picture and then getting the next sight picture correctly. So, and same with like if you're going to like shoot one, reload, shoot one. That second trigger pull doesn't really matter because the reload's what we're focusing on in that. So, you know, some people go through a lot of effort to get that same trigger pull every time. And like I said, there are devices. There's nothing wrong with those, but a lot of people who have gotten to the higher level of these sports with just up their plain carry or competition gun and, you know, dry fire with a dead trigger. So I wouldn't get too caught up in that. So if we want to go on, so I can have here maybe talk about some favorite drills that we do or things that have kind of helped us dry fire wise.
Yeah, I can start.
I can. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say that I'm a sandbagger and I don't do dry fire. I just wish I would. And so I don't really have a favorite drill. No, I'm trying to get back into it. So I don't have anything that stands out to me right now. I usually like to do the movement drills more than just the trigger drills. The one thing that I will say, and if we're just going to have honesty, the action shooting sport or action shooting show honesty moment. I find that I'll dry fire at like light switches and feel like, yeah, I was just doing some dry fire today. I really crushed it. And then later, or the truth is, I know that's not good dry fire. You know, if you aren't actually standing up, getting in a shooting position, getting that good grip, you're really not doing dry fire. So you can half-ass it if you feel like it's better than nothing, but it's not going to give you the improvements that you want to see unless you dedicate, 10 or 15 minutes a day or every other day to improve on it. So at this point, I don't have a favorite drill. I'm working on getting back into it. We should also caveat all of this with, I'm just a B-class USPSA shooter. If you want to learn from experts, you would go to a different show like Ben Steger's podcast or Ben Steger After Dark, whatever they're calling the new podcast.
Yeah.
But whether he tells it to you or we tell it to you, it's going to be the same stuff. There's not really a secret sauce that anyone has. You just have to be consistent and actually do it. That's my current take on dry fire. Tiger, why don't you tell us what you had for us?
I'm kind of like you, Mark. I've gotten out of it and I'm starting to get back into it. Mostly because I got really tired of sucking at pistol. But I do have kind of a set of drills that I do. I start out every dry fire session with 10 of the best trigger squeezes I can get. So that single, I'll rack the pistol every time. The white wall drill that Ryan was talking about earlier, but I really focus on getting 10 really good, solid trigger squeezes in, and then I move on to like a transition drill or reloads or whatever I happen to be working on that day. But I always try to start with really warming up on just a fundamental solid trigger pull before I try to add anything else in.
All right.
I think that's good advice. I think that's a good place to start. I definitely recommend that too. At the end of the day, you can't be good enough at trigger squeeze. Like you can't. There's no pinnacle of how still you can be when pulling the trigger. So I think that's always a good place to start.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. Yeah, much like you guys, my dry fire's kind of got max. It's been a little bit. I've been focusing on fitness a little bit more than the gun handling. But I know earlier I mentioned the white wall drill first. That helped my shooting, I think, more than anything else, because I thought like I had a flinch, or maybe I was like the pre-ignition push, or the what do they call it, milk in the grip, where your hand gets tight. I kept thinking, oh, I got this, or and it was really I just wasn't pulling the trigger back without moving the sights. Like it just came down to I didn't have a good trigger pull, and that was affecting me more than anything. And you would really be surprised. It really does not take. And some of that was actual grip strength, like how I was gripping the gun. So that definitely helped me more than anything. And probably second, and I don't know that there's a specific drill for this. I had a little room to move in my basement as far as dry fire. So setting up targets where I could shoot at one and then kind of do a small run and come into position and try to take another shot. That I know that helped a lot with 3-gun, with kind of entry, coming in and out of positions. Because really in all the action shooting sports, moving, and we say moving and shooting, most people aren't quite shooting quite at the same, like running and shooting at the same time. But most of it is being able to like break a shot, and as soon as that shot's broke, you start moving, and then being able to get into the next position or next place you're shooting, and as soon as you're in position and you're right on, you start shooting. I'm not a phenomenal marksman, but my kind of movement through a stage typically helps me shoot a little bit better and get a little higher positions than maybe my actual marksmanship skills would get me. So that's been a huge benefit. And least for three gun, if you're a three gunner, depending on what division you shoot, the dry fire even includes like shotgun loading. Early on in my three gun career, I spent a good amount of time just practicing quad loads and getting not just fast at them, but just consistent where it doesn't take anything to just throw them in there. And while I'm not quite as quick as I used to be, I'm still more than probably quicker than most of the people that I'm shooting with on a regular basis. So that kind of helps me absorb, the miss or shooting a little more aggressively because I can afford to toss an extra load in there.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to add for people. Tiger and I just keep talking over each other. We both have that good idea.
Ahead, Mark. You'll always talk first. I'll wait on you.
All right. I don't want to steal the good ideas that Ryan's just soft tossing to us. But
it's okay. I know you need me, so I'll work harder.
So like Ryan said there at the end, this isn't, we're talking mostly about pistol dry fire, but dry fire applies to all three guns. If you do three gun, if you're running gun, you can do dry fire with your rifle. There's a lot of things that go into that. Instead of drawing, maybe it's picking up a gun or going from a sling up, things that you would consider. Another thing that people find, you can do dry fire from positional shooting. If you're going to be, get into a position, get steady, pull that trigger. You can also do standing.
Specific on transport, we're looking at how to outfit a truck for Western Home. Now,
there we go. Sorry, this sound came in for someone. But another thing that people have a lot of difficulty with is offhand rifle. And there's a really good Patrick Kelly video on YouTube about offhand rifle shooting. The idea is that you can't be perfectly steady. You can't just concrete down and be that rest. You're going to be moving. And how do you get those hits while you're moving? That's a perfect thing to practice in dry fire. You can do that all day and get this idea of the gun's going to have a natural movement and you're going to break that shot when the sights are over the target. Things like that. Shotgun, you don't really need to practice the trigger so much because it's a shotgun. But if you're a terrible slug shooter, like almost all three gunners, that might be one area that you'd want to practice because depending on if you're shooting laser beams, those 1,600 feet per second slugs like Ryan shoots, or if you just shoot the 1,200 feet per second like the rest of us gamers shoot, people tend to flinch like crazy with slugs, even if they don't kick that bad. So that'd be one area to break that flinch. So those would be good things to think about with multiple guns. Another thing, going back to right before what Ryan was talking about, Rob Latham has a really good video on YouTube about why aiming is useless. So the video is just called Aiming is Useless. And he talks about, it doesn't matter what your sight picture looks like. It doesn't matter how you're what you're aiming at. If you cannot break that shot without moving the gun, aiming is worthless. People want to go out and say, well, I'm going to get a red dot for my pistol. That'll solve all my problems. If you can't pull that trigger without moving those sights, aiming is useless. So a lot of things to think about there. But again, the takeaway is you can dry fire with all three guns. You have to be able to pull the trigger with any gun without moving the rest of it. And I guess one thing we can maybe circle back to that Tiger said, I was tired of sucking with pistol. One thing that I've said for years is that pistol has to be your bread and butter. You have to, if you're a concealed and carrier, that's your go-to gun. That's the gun that's always on you. If it's your home defense gun, you need to be as proficient as possible with that. And then in the games, USPSA and IDPA are all pistol. Three gun, if you're weak on, or if you can be strong on any one gun in three gun, be strong in your pistol. That'll carry you a long ways. And then run and gun, you can make up tons of time on people if you're good with your pistol. And so your pistol has to be your bread and butter. Don't be satisfied sucking with your pistol. That would be the last thing I'd say there. So go ahead, Tiger. See what you can add to that.
Well, I'm gonna bounce off of that last point. Yeah, don't be satisfied sucking with your pistol. and you'll see a lot of guys who practice primarily rifle, and they don't dry fire rifle. That's just what they practice on live fire. And let's face it, shooting rifle's a lot more fun, because you get to be John Rambo or whoever with the, whatever. Everybody in the movies carries a rifle. Nobody is just a badass with a pistol unless you're John Wick.
And it's easier.
But,
Rifle's easier.
Yeah, it's just easier. It's easier. It's more fun. You can shoot things further away. Like there's a lot to that. But going back to where you can dry fire with any of the guns, I spend a lot of time or spent a lot of time early on in my shooting career dry firing on my 22-pound bolt. I would get down behind it in a seated position. In the military, they call it snapping in, right? Where you get into this awkward position or this shooting position and you sit there and you just dry fire. And then you rack the gun and then you dry fire again. But it's all about being comfortable in the position as much as it is about the trigger squeeze or any of that. So I would do that with my RPR. I would get down into a shooting position or even freehand. I can freehand, offhand shoot my AK and my AR significantly better because I dry fire with the RPR. And like I said, it's 22 pounds, so it's really moving around, but I get a feel for how the gun is going to move and how I can make it move in a certain pattern so that I can squeeze the trigger at the right time and do all of that. You can really practice a lot of positional stuff with dry fire where the trigger pull itself is almost irrelevant to the exercise that you're trying to do. But I would still lump it in with dry fire practice.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say most of what you'll benefit out of dry fire has nothing to do with the trigger. I mean, I think that's what most people think of, but really, most of the drills that I do, like there's a trigger pull in it because that definitely is important, but like everything else that's happening is probably more important.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say it's both. I'd say it's all the above. One thing we could have touched on quickly, Ryan, in the beginning, we were talking about safety. Almost all modern firearms can be dry fired if they're not a rim fire. So that's a myth a lot of people have. It's like, well, I don't want to hurt my gun by pulling the trigger. It's like, you should pull that trigger 50,000 times a year, even if you're only shooting 500 or 5,000 rounds. The gun will be fine for most modern rifles,
Absolutely.
pistols.
And if it doesn't, most parts are pretty cheap. So if like you've got a gun like CZs, I think and this is just going off of what I hearsay, but like trigger return springs, I think is what it is they tend to break over time. If you got a gun and it's like, hey, the trigger return spring, when you do a lot of firing, whether dry fire or not, will break. Okay, we'll buy 5 of them. They're $3 or whatever. Just replace them every so often. If there's really a concern, the little bit of extra money you spend on replacing whatever parts it is fine, because when you need to use that gun, it's gonna work and you're gonna hit what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
All right.
Tools meant to be used.
Yep, exactly. Yep. You wear out screwdrivers, you go buy a new one. I mean, usually we don't wear them out. We break them using them as
pry bar,
but yeah, but yeah, things wear out and we just replace them. And no one here has. I mean, they're all just tools. So, all right. So next thing I think I had on our list was tips. I think we've kind of been going over a lot of that. I think one thing we haven't really mentioned, but that's really important, is when you're dry firing, really pay attention and focus on what the drill is about. So there's a lot of, we're doing a lot of different things in dry fire, and not everything can be perfect all the time. So if you are working on a transition drill, like I said earlier, one target to the next, your vision's what you're working on. You're focusing on that. If you're drawing to that first shot and your draw is a little sloppy or a little bit slow, and this is kind of something you got to learn with experience, but maybe focusing on that draw is not important at that moment in time. Just get the gun out, as long as you're getting it out and getting the grip you need or whatever. Focus on your vision. Now, if you do a lot of that and your draw is like crummy, maybe, after you've done that transition drill however long, maybe then you do want to focus on your draw or something like that. But at that point, you're focusing on your draw and you're not worrying about transitions. Your brain, you can't focus on everything all at once. So, ideally we want everything perfect all the time. Just understand that if we're trying to get better, we can only do one thing at a time. So another good illustration would be your draw. If I'm trying to lower my draw time, say I got a 1.5-second draw time, and it's like, man, that's not good enough. I need to cut that down. Well, then, focus on grabbing that gun, ripping it out, and getting up, and don't worry about the perfect sight picture. That sight picture can be something we focus on later. Right now, I'm working on getting my hand, getting my a good grip, firing grip exactly how I want it, getting that gun out and getting that punched up and shot. The trigger broke. We'll focus on that speed, and then once we're at the speed that we need, we can focus on, okay, now I got to do this and get a good sight picture. Now I have to do this and get a good sight picture and get a good trigger squeeze. But each of these times, we're only really concerned about one thing. I know, and if you want, we probably should have mentioned this before. If you want the be all end all for dry fire, Steve Anderson has a podcast and books, and I think we'll share some books here a little bit later. But he's kind of the godfather of dry fire, so he talks a lot about that. Though we can only focus on one thing.
Yeah, one way to say the same thing, only kind of say it a little different, is if you're working on improving a time, one thing to think about if you're starting at, let's say, Ryan's 1.5-second draw, if you're trying to push the pace by lowering that speed or lowering that beep time, so you move it to 1.2. Okay, I hit that beep. Now I lower it to 1 second. I hit that beep. Think about what is it that you're improving, or what's starting to slide to let you hit that time. Is it because you got a lot more consistent? Are you more fluid? Are you getting that exact same position? Or, like Ryan said, are you letting the sight picture kind of drag? Are you pulling the trigger as soon as the gun's up instead of seeing those sights? Think about it in reverse as well. You can say to yourself, this time it's just going to be all about the hand speed, hand speed, hand speed, hand speed. Or you can do it as kind of a holistic thing where I'm going to draw in 1.5 seconds and I'm going to move that time down until I know I'm not getting good draws. And then when you get to that point, you say, why was I able to improve this much, but I can't go faster? Is it because I'm not moving faster, or is it because I let things slide a little? I'm not getting that true good grip. I'm not getting that good sight picture. I know I didn't have a good marry of my hands when I brought them together. I just kind of let that slide. So things to think about there. It's a lot about being body aware as much as it is just getting the reps in. That's one of the things. If you take a class with somebody like Robert Vogel, he'll say, I can show you all the drills, but I got to show you how to train yourself. Because one day with them, you're going to learn some things, but it's the days afterwards. Any good teacher or trainer will tell you it's the time you put in after the class that's where you really make the dividends. So definitely good things to think about there. I think Ryan really nailed it on the head. I just wanted to kind of flip it for people to kind of think about there. Same thing, another way to talk about it, Ryan was talking about more complex drills. So if you say you do a shoot, reload and move, shoot, and you start to lower that time, where were you saving time? Was it because your reload was better, you were moving faster, or you were letting the sight pictures get sloppy? Where were you actually saving time? And so you want to be making sure that you're saving time in productive movements, not just letting things go the wayside.
Yeah, and to note with that, those more complicated drills, one of the downsides to those is that if you're not hitting your time, sometimes you don't know why that is. If you're doing 5 things in a drill and you keep not hitting the time, is it the draw each time? Maybe this time it's the draw, the next time it's the transition or the reload, or there are times and places for that, but just understand if you're throwing a whole bunch of stuff into one drill, there's a lot of extra noise that it gets hard to figure out, like, what is it really that I'm screwing up on.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Tiger?
And one of the things that I will say that I think is gonna maybe, I don't want to say insult a bunch of people, but if you're going to be doing dry fire and you're going to be trying to improve through dry fire, one of the biggest things is you've got to be honest with yourself. Like, you've got to be willing to say, especially on like those more complicated drills, draw, shoot, transition, shoot. If you're not hitting your beeps, you can't say, well, I've always been good at transition, so I know it wasn't that. And then, blaming other things, even though it might have been your transition that was slow, or your movement step might have been slow, or you can say, well, I've got a 1 second draw time, so I know that on this 8-step drill, my draw isn't the problem. Well, maybe it is. Maybe you're thinking so much about these other things that your draw has slowed down from a 1 second to a 1.3 second or something. And you really got to be on all aspects of that, even on the simpler drills, like, hey, that trigger squeeze didn't feel great. What did I do wrong? What did I do different that time that didn't feel great? Maybe it was my grip, maybe it was my trigger finger, maybe it was, maybe I flinched at the last second because a bird flew by outside the window and I saw it, like, whatever it happens to be. You really just need to be able to pinpoint that and be honest with yourself and say, okay, I screwed that up and I'm going to work on that next.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add, there's a couple things I just thought of. One thing that helps me, if I'm kind of made a breakthrough with something, I've done it a handful of times, I'm feeling like, I got something. One thing I try to do is end on, and this is kind of more a mental game thing, but I try to end with 3 really good ones. So I'll say, okay, 3 more of these, and as soon as I get like 3 solid ones, and I mean they were just right what I'm wanting, then I'll put that drill aside. The other thing that's important is just kind of flip side of this. If you are just like crashing and burning on something, like you really just like it's starting to fall apart. You're doing it well and it's falling apart. Sometimes, and this is kind of, you got to know yourself. There'll be times where I'm like, okay, 3 more good ones, and I'll get 3 like pretty good ones, and I'll stop there. But you can get tired. You can really start like just falling apart. And if you keep practicing, what you're doing now is you're programming yourself to do it wrong. And there's times where you just need to set it aside, say, we're done for the right now, the rest of the night, maybe come back to it later if you've got longer dry fire, or maybe tomorrow or the next day. But you don't want to keep practicing things wrong, especially if you're getting fatigued. That's the big one I know, is I just start getting tired and things just get sloppy, and it's really hard, especially as guys, we want to like fight through it and like, I can get this. And, at some point you just have to, stop so you don't just keep doing things wrong.
Yeah, a place that sticks out to me right there is quad loading. If you're practicing quad loading or loading 2, one of the things you're invariably going to do is rack your thumb. Run your thumb over something and your thumb's going to be bleeding, your fingernail's going to be pulled. Even if you have the lifter, everything's machined out, whatever, your thumb just tends to get worn out doing that. And you'll see guys that, here's my Instagram, look at my bloody thumb, I'm getting those reps in. It's like, you're hurting yourself, you're probably not doing it right, and how many days is it going to take for that to heal before you can do reps again? Are you gaining anything by doing that? And then 2 days later, they're back at it. Well, that scab came off. Oh, I'm really showing this shotgun who's boss. Like, come on, buddy. let it build up. You don't have to get it those 5 second load 8 today. It can be something that you build up a callus, let that skin toughen up over time. You don't have to shred it down to the bone to get that work done. And so that's one that, at least, I don't know if I've personally gone that far, but I know I've made this thumb bleed several times practicing quad loading. So.
Yeah, and on that, you mentioned it once, bragging about it on Instagram, and I'm just as bad as anybody else. If I dry fire, especially after a long time when I haven't dry fired, it's like, oh, look at me, I'm actually training on something, and you want that external validation, and you want the digital cookies that everybody gives you, but on the flip side of that, the guys I know who legitimately dry fire the most, you almost never, ever, ever see them post any training, much less dry fire training on it. Like, the guys who post a lot of dry fire training on Instagram probably only do it for a few reps for the Instagram post, and then that's it. So if you see somebody who is posting a dry fire video every day and has for a year, don't feel like you're missing out or that they're a way better shooter than you, because you're not, because that's probably all that they're doing. Like, I know a lot of guys who post a lot of Instagram posts on dry fire and live fire training, and like me, really aren't that good at shooters. So
But my sponsors want me to have engagement with my followers.
Yeah.
Come on, I need to keep the brand alive.
Yeah. Now I will say though,
well,
I was just say video though is I've used video a lot, and there is definitely a lot to be said about videoing your dry fire, because you will see
absolutely.
you will see a ton that you're not seeing from behind the gun. As simple as, yeah, I'm dipping the shit out of the trigger, the sights when I pull the trigger, to like I pulled off that target before. Especially transition, you like think you did everything great, and then you watch the video and you pulled off that target before your finger would have broke the trigger. Like, that's the kind of thing you can spot in a video that in real time it just goes right by. Like, you're paying attention, but you just missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Video everything you can, not just dry fire. Video stage runs, video match videos, video range time. Like, anytime you can get somebody to take a video of you, or you can set your camera up, video everything you can, because it's really the only honest way to see stuff that you can't feel.
Yeah, and third person is definitely better than the first person. I know some people have like the hat cams or the eye cams, and like I think there probably is value to that, but that third person video, or if you're shooting on a range and you can put up a video on a tripod out in front of you, or whatever, all that is really good, valuable information.
But also
absolutely.
having somebody that knows what to look for when they're videoing also helps. There's video that you put for the gram, and then there's video that you're actually going to learn from. So if all the video is of the targets, or all the video is over your shoulder, it's not going to help you very much. If they can get off to a 45-degree angle where you can see how you're handling the gun, because that's ultimately what's going to matter. And let's get the Instagram points too. They'll see the targets, but if you're in frame in the right way where they can actually see your gun handling and the targets, it's going to be a lot more valuable than just the guy right over your shoulder, giving you that action shooting whatever. And then you also, especially if you run into malfunctions, if you have the camera and get in there to see how you're handling malfunctions, can be very valuable. Now, Ryan knows that sometimes if your cameraman's giving side comments about your malfunction clearance abilities, maybe not as helpful, but those situations definitely still apply. So,
Yeah, it's great to have friends who are excited that you got a malfunction and then really excited because they think you're going to do it again. So,
I have no idea what that's about though.
Yeah. let's move on. And the next one is books. Now, I think Mark brought a couple. We've kind of given you some primers and ideas of like what dry fire is, but there's quite a few like awesome books. And I think the one he's got would be one of the top. There's really two guys doing everything. I mentioned Steve Anderson earlier. He's got 3, 4, 5, 6 books. Unfortunately, I don't have any of his books yet. It's hard to see. Dry Fire Training by Ben Steger. For Practical Pistol he's got 3, 4, 5, 6 different books. He actually has a new book coming out. I don't think it's out yet, but it is Dry Fire, Live Fire, everything mixed together. So some of these books are going to be kind of antiquated, I guess, but if you find them, there's a ton of good drills. And if you can make it through these books and can stay consistent with all of these, you will be the best pistol shooter at your club, most likely.
So the ones I have are the originals. He's got Skills and Drills Reloaded and then Dry Fire Training Reloaded, where he updated them and made a bunch of improvements. The other one I also have, I think my friend has it, I gave it away to somebody, is just the general practical shooting book, where it just kind of goes through everything that we've covered a lot of it, but just general things you need to know. I think if you were so poor you could only buy one book, I think Skills and Drills would probably cover you, because you can take everything from Skills and Drills, copyright, we're not using this for monetary gain, but you could take these drills and turn them into dry fire drills. You just need to think, how can I shrink them down? How can I get those same things? But yeah, Skills and Drills is good. It makes so much sense that he's tying the books together, because in an ideal world, you would do drill 1A from dry fire for a week, and then you'd go to the range and do drill 1A for Skills and Drills. You would tie them together, and then you'd build kind of a training plan that followed along those lines of, all right, I did 1 week of dry fire on this skill, and I'm going to live fire that on a Saturday.
And I think the kind of the interesting thing, it sounds like, from this book, he has a co-writer in it. They broke everything down into like 3 different levels. So you have like your beginner level, I guess. You kind of have your like comfortable shooting, I guess probably like B class type people. You have your like top, you're a little bit higher level, and then you've got your like Death Stalker GM, like they show up at your club match and your chances of winning as your top A class guy are gone. So each of those, with the breakdown, they kind of give you different things to focus on in the live fire, dry fire, whatnot. But you will get a ton out of any dry fire book, whether it's the Steger books or the Steve Anderson books. Those are the 2 I'm familiar with, and there may be more, but I think those would be worthy purchases if you can't buy ammo right now, or it's hard to find. So spend that money that you would have bought a box of 2, buy an Amazon, go to Amazon and buy a dry fire book.
Yeah, I should point out this does have, so at least the dry fire book does have sample plans, training plans. So, day 1, your Monday you do learning drills, Tuesday you do marksmanship training, core USPSA skills, so on. And then don't be afraid to apply all of these to your rifle too. Everything you're doing with this, you can do reloads, you can do movement, you can do double taps, transitions, all those things still apply to your rifle, or if you're weird, your shotgun as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I mean, they're good tools. The other thing that Ryan asked me to bring out was, I keep these next to my Playboys from the 70s, my 3 Gun Nation magazine when it used to be in print. If you have access to these, or if you know anybody that does, these used to have drills in them that you could do. And so you can pull drills out of there for 3 gun. I think you can maybe still find 3 Gun Nation classifiers online. I'm not sure if that's the case. But those would be a good things if you're looking for 3-gun specific stuff. Those classifiers used to be real high speed, low setup kind of stages, and they would be really easy for you to work on just pure 3-gun skills, without building a big field course where you have to run 200 yards or whatever. So good training things there.
Tiger, you got any books or anything you want to add to that part?
Yeah, and it's kind of a weird addition because it doesn't actually have a ton about dry fire in it, but anything in it can be used with dry fire. Is Ryan Cleckner's for long range shooting or intro to long range shooting. And there's a lot in that about how to set up a rifle and stuff. And you can, and it doesn't have to be a precision rifle. Like everybody sees that long range tag and immediately thinks bench rest gun or bolt gun or anything like that. You can take those things with a few of the zeroing drills and stuff and do dry fire with them with your AR and really learn how to get the gun to fit you better. It's and it's cheap. You can pick it up for $10-15. I'm sure there's EPUBs or Kindle versions of it out there. I have a hard copy, and it's awesome. And there's a lot of good information in there. And like I said, everything that's in it can be applied to the dry fire realm. So,
Tiger, can you repeat the name and author? You kind of cut out when you said it there for me.
It is Ryan M. Cleckner, Long Range Shooting Handbook, a beginner's guide to precision rifle shooting.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's it. I read that last month. Actually, I just bought it and read it last month. That's a good addition for sure. So while we're talking about spending money,
and he's got a podcast and stuff too. So
I did not know that. I'll have to listen to that.
Don't be afraid to get on YouTube too. I mean, there's a million guys with a million drills. Type in YouTube and dry fire, you're going to find a lot of stuff. So you don't have to run out and spend money on these books. The books are good because they're structured for the most part, but you can find drills on YouTube if you're in a hotel room somewhere. You don't have to have your whole library with you to do stuff. So
yeah. So while we're talking about dry fire, spending money on dry fire, this next section, let me caveat with, I have bought a lot, and I'll show you a handful of them. I've bought a lot of tools for dry fire. I don't know that I would buy any of them again because you really don't need them. I mean, they're every day. We talked about the dry fire mags, which there's a couple different ways. I know there's the cool fire, which is like a barrel replacement. There's the mag that fits up in there and makes your trigger pull the same each time. I don't think those are necessary. There is like things like this SIRT pistol, which if you see on the end, there's actually 2 little lasers on it. It's got a weighted mag to keep things consistent. Each time you pull this trigger, depending on, there's 2 different settings. One setting, when you pull the trigger, as soon as it breaks, a little light laser flashes on the wall. The idea is that when you pull that trigger and break it, it's kind of, you can adjust it, the point of aim, so that you kind of get a visual as to what you're shooting at. The second setting, as you take it up, there's a laser that shines continuously on the wall, and then you break it, that second laser shines. So the idea there is, if you're pulling the trigger back and that laser comes on and is bouncing all over the place, you are not keeping your gun steady when you pull the trigger. I think 2 issues with this, and there's probably still a good use for training with this, just as an inert gun. You get in the habit then of, you can easily get in the habit of staring at the target, and not that that's a bad thing, but you're looking for that laser. And as things are changing, I missed. You're making your corrections based off what you're seeing with the laser, not necessarily your visual of your sights. So there's that focus that takes you away. I think that's maybe the big downside to that. And the other, which kind of goes along with it, is you don't really need that. Your sights are telling you everything that you need already. So an extra laser's, I think, maybe more harm than good. They also have these little chamber inserts. So this has got just a little button on the back that your firing pin would hit, and then it shoots out a little bit, laser, real quick on the wall. I got this. There's actually an app you can put on your phone. You point it at like a target or a wall, and it'll track where that laser went. I don't really use it anymore, but it's actually iDryFire is the company that makes that app. Each time, then you have to like pull the trigger back, the hammer back or rack the gun. There's stuff like that. I think
Ryan, to add to that, while we're talking about lasers and trainers, they also make, I don't know if CERT makes it or just the insert, but they'll make lasers that fire IR laser, so you won't see it. But your apps, if you're using the webcam app or your cell phone app, it will still pick it up. And then you can get the feedback through the app without having that dot on the wall. So more money, you'd spend a little more money on that sort of thing. But that's another thing to consider as well, to kind of avoid those, oh, I see the pretty red dot. That's where the IR laser you won't be able to see with the phone, or you have a webcam app that will also pick it up. So
yeah. Now, if this stuff like excites you that you're going to want to dry fire more, maybe it is worth the cost of admission. I mean, that was certainly the case with me. But long term, I don't use any of these anymore in my dry fire when I dry fire. So I don't know that I'd necessarily recommend that. Maybe the one exception, this is an airsoft gun, so orange tip. It actually shoots airsoft BBs, which and it's weighted pretty much the same as a real 2011. It's got safety. I mean, it's pretty close. It fits in all my 1911, 2011 holsters, and the slide kind of reciprocates. I think people like that because, well, there's real recoil and your gun really recoils, and so it's kind of it doesn't recoil at all like a real gun. So I don't know that I'd consider that a huge benefit. The one area that I do kind of like this, and I do keep this around for this reason, is I'll actually go outside and set up some cardboard targets and work on movement drills. So like I was talking earlier, if I'm like working on coming into a position and breaking the trigger as soon as I'm in there and my sights have settled down enough, that the airsoft pellet will go through and either get stuck or kind of go through. Normally it gets stuck in the target, but that gives me a little visual feedback that what I saw in my sights was actually what was close to what would have really happened. Because when you're coming into position and the sights are bouncing around, sometimes I like to have just a little bit more like concrete, like, yeah, what I thought I saw was actually what I saw. So, and they make little targets. You can actually set up like a little shooting gallery, like in your basement. They got swingers and all kinds of stuff that you can do. So that is definitely something. Mark, you're making a lot of noise. Tiger, you got anything to add? Oh, well, we were going to get to you with the Mantis. You want to talk about that?
Tiger, there you go.
So that's something that that I picked up a couple years ago. I picked up the Gen 1. They now have 2 or 3 different models of it. The X10 is the latest and greatest, and I'm honestly considering upgrading to it because it's got some features that look really awesome. But what it is it's I wish I had a camera so that I could show you. It's a little rail mounted. It mounts to the bottom of any pistol rail, or it goes onto a Picatinny rail for rifles. And it's got a bunch of accelerometers in it, and it tells you how you moved the gun pre-trigger pull, how you move the gun during your trigger pull, and then for like a half a second after your trigger pull. And it scores every shot. It tells you, like, gives a score for it, and then gives some feedback on what it thinks you did that shot. If, say, it was particularly poor, maybe it thinks that you pushed too much palm pressure on, or you squeezed, you broke low left with a Glock, right? Like, that's everybody. Not enough trigger finger on the trigger. And it'll tell you all that. And it's I always described it as the shot timer for dry fire. It actually has a shot timer built into it too, and it's got one feature where it's like a cadence, so you can sit there and squeeze the trigger on a one trigger pull every second cadence, and then you can speed up and you can try and match that, like, metronome style. I really love it. It's got a social media aspect to it that I've never really used a whole lot. If you've got a bunch of buddies who use Mantis X's, you can compete with each other to see who can get the highest number of trigger squeezes in a day or a week or whatever. So it adds a reason to keep training with it. But yeah, just Bluetooth to an app on your phone, and all the data pops up there. And, like, I've got all of the data for every gun I've ever used it on my phone. Like, it all pops up and comes back to my phone, and I've got all of that history. And you can see times where I dry fired a lot and my scores went up, and then you can see times where I didn't dry fire a lot and my scores went way down. But in ways, I heard some people who have talked about it complain about, like, added weight to the gun. It weighs less than a flashlight. It's not that bad. The newer ones, I will say, are a little bit spendier. I think they're $200, $250 maybe, for the latest and greatest model. The model I've got was $100 then. And if you've got the model I've got, like, if I call Mantis, they offer a trade-in program. They will give me full retail value for sending them the old towards a new one. So I can get the new upgraded Mantis for $150 plus my old Mantis. Which I don't know any other company that'll do that for something that I've had for 4 years, or 3 years now. It's a really cool little tool. It does get you more excited about dry fire, or at least it did me. And a lot of people say that you kind of outgrow it, and I can see that, where if you dry fire enough and you get up to like some, grandmaster level, or even top A-level USPSA shooters, probably don't need it. They've probably outgrown it. But for anybody who's mid-pack and below, it's definitely a tool to use. I use it a lot training new people to shoot pistol. I'll put it on the pistol and say, hey, let's look at this, let's see what you're doing. And it can be used on live fire or dry fire, but I primarily use it on dry fire. So
yeah, and I was I don't have one yet. I'll probably pick one up at some point when money becomes available for it. But there's a lot of people who I respect who say a lot of good things about it. I was a little skeptical at first, but yeah, I think it's definitely something I can see in my future, because there's certainly some benefit there. And even in the live fire, I hear a lot of top shooters, rifle shooters, that I think maybe it's Ash Hess that talks a lot about it, and he's a trainer and pretty amazing rifle shooter. So
yeah, and the new one has some cool features. It has a like a recoil meter built into it, so you can use it to compare, like, load development, especially on pistols. You're always looking for that real soft shooting, exactly 125 power factor load. You can use that for that. You can use it for to see how changes in grip affect your recoil actual movement. Like, it gives you actual data. That's why I always called it the shot timer for dry fire, but now it's giving you other empirical data versus, that load feels a little hotter, or that load feels a little softer, or whatever. This gun is better. Not well. Here's an actual number for it.
Awesome. So we're probably we're
All
about
right,
an hour and 4.
All right.
Yep.
I got a
You
couple
wanna-
things to add.
Okay. Go for
Well,
it.
we're talking about things that we buy or things that are worth buying. About the only thing that I buy or have bought is I got some Acme. I don't know if these are going to be fuzzy. So if you're a reloader, instead of buying dummy rounds, which can be expensive, what I've done is bought some Acme makes red coated bullets. I don't load any red coated bullets. And so I've loaded those as dummy rounds. So I can easily see these red bullets are not loaded. That's the only thing. I've never ever put powder behind a red bullet. They have no primer in them. I don't know if you can see that. But that way I can do more USPSA type drills where I want that weighted mag. I want to be able to pull from my belt and feel in my hand a weighted mag. So I've spent, you get 100 pack for like $8 or something like that. They have samples on their website. That's one thing I've done. I have spent a little money on the Ben Steger Pro Shop and got like their miniature sized targets, like the USPSA, stuff like that. And then they have like mini poppers. I got them on my wall. You can cut them out of cardboard yourself, but it's convenient. They're the right size and the right shape. And then the last thing I would add is you should probably have a good shot timer, an actual shot timer, if you're doing dry fire or any training. I personally like the CED 7000, and I also like the Pocket Pro are my two favorite timers. You can download cell phone apps. They'll probably work for dry fire if you just need a beep and a beep, but getting a good timer, especially once you're doing live fire, is going to help you there. They are not cheap. You got to spend at least $100 for pretty much any decent timer, but they are going to be worthwhile if you're going to be serious about any of these gun games. So those would be the three things that I have spent money on that I think actually help when it comes to training.
And I'll add to that the packed is actually it's a really good par timer for this kind of stuff. And the reason I say that, it's really, really quick to switch between par times. The SED's pretty quick too, but the Pocket Pro 2s take a little bit longer if you're switching between a lot of different par times. So if all you're buying a timer for is dry fire, I'd skip the Pocket Pro 2. I have one of those, but I would stick with like the pack timer or the SED, because they just from someone who's messed with a lot of these different timers, the packed is really nice, and with the clip on the outside, you can reach down and easily hit that big button there to start your par time. So I actually, with the Pocket Pro, I use for like matches when I'm running the timer, but the pack pretty much that's the only thing I use for dry fire, just because it's a lot quicker to adjust everything. So we could probably start wrapping this up. You got anything else to add, Tiger?
Everyone should dry fire more than you are now. I don't care how much you're doing it now. You should do it more. Beyond that, we didn't actually touch on low budget training, like live fire drills, easy, low things like that. Maybe that'll be a different show.
Yeah, I think that should be a different show.
Yeah, I do too. We covered a lot of information tonight, and but yeah, the big takeaway is dry fire a lot, dry fire consistently, and make sure you're dry firing intelligently.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Just the other thing is like set kind of a goal for yourself. If you're gonna if you found the magic ammo fairy and you have 3,000 rounds for this year's season, plan on pulling the trigger in dry fire 10 times for every round you want to shoot this year, or set your own goal, maybe 5 times or 10 times, whatever it may be. Set some sort of goal in your mind that you're going to put in with ammo so expensive and so hard to find, make each bullet you shoot count by doing your dry fire. Then you're not wasting that ammo where you could have, I wouldn't have missed so much if I would have done this, or this ammo's so expensive, I can't believe I shot this much at the range. You make it count in dry fire, and you'll be a lot happier with your results shooting in live fire.
Yeah, and something we didn't mention, glad you just made me think of that. All of this dry fire still needs to be confirmed in live fire. If you just do a ton of dry fire and you don't go out to the range to confirm that you're gripping tight enough, that you're pulling the trigger right, you could really program the wrong things in there, and then when you get to the range, find out that they don't work. So definitely take this to the range, and anything that you're learning, actually do it live. And we can talk about this even more when we talk about like low budget training, but you can dry fire at the range. There are many times where I will do a drill and I'll do it live, and then I'll do it like 5 or 6 times dry, and then I'll do it live a couple times, and then I'll do it dry. There's things you notice dry, even if you have the ammo, you have unlimited ammo. There are things that you will notice dry that you did not notice when you have this big explosion out in front of your face and the gun's jumping all over the place, and there's just too much extra stuff going on to notice. So definitely pay attention to, consider throwing that in if you're starting to do this. I think, yep, we've gone a little bit long. This is our second show. If you guys do have any things you'd like to hear us talk about, or comments or suggestions or anything, please leave a message on wherever you saw this, YouTube, or I'll probably set up some social media and stuff for this as well. So thanks everyone for watching, and you guys have a great night.